Hey, thank you so much for coming back. If you're new here, I'm really glad you found this channel. Today I have a story for you that still gives me chills every time I think about it. It's about family, lies, betrayal, and a truth so devastating that it changed everything for one woman. So sit back, get comfortable, and let me tell you what happened. The body on the table wasn't my husband. I knew it the moment they pulled back the sheet. 32 years of marriage, and I knew every line on that man's face, every scar on his body, every detail that made him who he was. And the man lying in that cold, sterile room was not Thomas. But my daughter had called me crying, told me her father was dead, told me to come to the morgue immediately. So if this wasn't Thomas, then who was it? And more importantly, where was my husband? The answer to that question would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life, everything I thought I knew about my family, and everything I thought I knew about the man I had loved for 3 decades. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand who we were before that day. You need to understand what I lost and what I discovered. My name is Helen. I'm 58 years old. I live in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where you can leave your doors unlocked, where life moves at a gentle pace. I've lived here my whole life. I married Thomas when I was 26. He was 29, handsome, confident, with dreams bigger than our little town could hold. Thomas was a businessman. That's how he always described himself, a businessman. He started with nothing, just a high school diploma and a willingness to work harder than anyone else. Over the years, he built a small empire. Real estate mostly, buying properties, fixing them up, renting them out or selling them for profit. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. It provided us with the good life. We had one daughter together, Sarah. She was our miracle baby, born after years of trying, after countless disappointments and false hopes. When she finally came into the world, screaming and red-faced and perfect, I thought my heart would burst with joy. She was everything to us, our whole world. Sarah grew up fast, the way children do. One day she was taking her first steps, and the next she was graduating high school. She went to college, got a degree in business like her father, and came back to work with him. Thomas was thrilled. He always wanted Sarah to take over the company someday, to continue what he had built. By the time the events I'm about to tell you happened, Sarah was 31 years old. She was married to a man named Derek, who also worked at Thomas's company. They had been together for 5 years, married for 3. No children yet, though I kept hoping. I wanted grandchildren more than anything. Our life seemed perfect. Or at least, that's what I thought. That's what I believed. I was a fool. The day everything changed, started like any other day. It was a Tuesday in early November. The leaves had turned, painting our town in shades of orange and gold. The air was crisp, but not yet cold. A beautiful fall day, the kind that makes you feel grateful to be alive. I was in my kitchen that morning, making coffee, looking out the window at our backyard. Thomas had already left for work. He always left early, before I was even fully awake. That was his way. Dedicated to a fault? I used to tease him about it, tell him that the office would still be there if he arrived an hour later. He would just smile and kiss my forehead and say that success requires sacrifice. I had plans that day. Nothing special. Some grocery shopping, a hair appointment, maybe lunch with my friend Martha if she was free. The ordinary routines of an ordinary life. My phone rang around 10 in the morning. I saw Sarah's name on the screen and smiled. She usually didn't call during work hours. I wondered if maybe she had some news. Maybe she was finally pregnant. Maybe I was going to be a grandmother. I answered the phone with a cheerful hello. The sound that came back was not cheerful at all. Sarah was crying. Not just crying, sobbing. The kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from somewhere primal, somewhere beyond words. For a moment, I couldn't understand anything she was saying. It was just noise, just pain. Sarah? Sarah, honey, what's wrong? What happened? She took a gasping breath, trying to control herself enough to speak. And then she said the words that stopped my heart. Mom. Dad. There was an accident. He's dead. Dad is dead. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. The world tilted, went blurry at the edges. What? What are you saying? That's not possible. I just saw him this morning. He was fine. His car, Sarah interrupted, still crying. His car went off the road. They found it at the bottom of Miller's Ravine. He didn't make it, Mom. They need you to come. They need you to identify the body. Miller's Ravine. I knew that place. Everyone in town knew that place. It was a winding stretch of road outside of town, with a sharp curve that had claimed more than a few lives over the years. There was talk about putting up better guardrails, but nothing ever happened. Small-town politics, small-town apathy. But Thomas knew that road. He had driven it hundreds of times. He was a careful driver. How could he have gone off at the curve? Where? I managed to ask. Where do I need to go? The county morgue. I'm already here. I came as soon as they called. Mom, please hurry. I can't do this alone. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember getting my purse or my keys or locking the front door. I don't remember the drive to the morgue, though it was 15 miles away. The whole thing is a blur, like a dream you can't quite hold on to after waking. What I do remember is walking through those doors. The smell hit me first. Antiseptic, chemicals, something underneath that I didn't want to think about. The lighting was harsh, fluorescent, the kind that makes everyone look sick. The walls were a pale institutional green, the kind of color designed to calm, but which only succeeded in making everything feel more sterile, more cold. Sarah was waiting for me in the lobby. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, her makeup smeared, her hair disheveled. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn to work that morning, a professional blouse and skirt that now looked wrinkled and out of place. She ran to me the moment she saw me, threw her arms around me, and held on like she was drowning. I held her back, feeling her body shake with sobs, feeling my own tears start to fall. It's going to be okay, I heard myself say, even though I didn't believe it, even though nothing would ever be okay again. We'll get through this together. A man approached us. He was wearing a white coat, had a clipboard in his hands, and introduced himself as Dr. Patel, the county medical examiner. His voice was gentle, professional, practiced. He had done this many times before, delivered bad news to grieving families, led them to cold rooms to look at cold bodies. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, I'm very sorry for your loss. I know this is difficult, but we need you to formally identify the body whenever you're ready. I wasn't ready. I would never be ready. But I nodded anyway, because that's what was expected. That's what had to be done. Sarah took my hand as we followed Dr. Patel down a long hallway. Our footsteps echoed on the tile floor. The sound was hollow, empty, like the feeling in my chest. He led us to a room at the end of the hall. It was cold inside, much colder than the rest of the building. There was a table in the center, covered with a white sheet. Underneath that sheet was a shape, a human shape, a body. My husband, my Thomas, the man I had loved for 32 years, the father of my child, the center of my world. Take your time, Dr. Patel said quietly. When you're ready, I'll pull back the sheet. I took a deep breath, squeezed Sarah's hand, and nodded. Dr. Patel stepped forward and gently pulled back the sheet, revealing the face underneath. And that's when everything stopped. That's when the world tilted on its axis, and nothing made sense anymore. Because the face I was looking at was not Thomas. It was a man, yes, roughly the same age as Thomas, same general build, same gray hair, but the features were different. The nose was wrong. The chin was wrong. There was a scar above the left eyebrow that Thomas didn't have. And the hands. I made myself look at the hands because I knew my husband's hands better than I knew my own. The hands were different. Thomas had a crooked pinky finger on his right hand, broken in a childhood accident and never properly set. This man's fingers were straight and unblemished. This isn't him, heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Dr. Patel frowned. I'm sorry? This isn't my husband. This isn't Thomas. Sarah made a sound beside me, something between a gasp and a cry. Her hand tightened on mine to the point of pain. Mom, what are you talking about? That's Dad. That's his face. That's... Look at his hands, I interrupted. Look at his pinky finger. Your father broke his right pinky when he was 9 years old. He always joked about it. This man's fingers are straight. This isn't Thomas. Dr. Patel leaned forward, examining the body's hands. His frown deepened. Mrs. Mitchell, the identification we have matches the documents found in the car. The driver's license, the registration, everything indicates this is Thomas Mitchell. Then someone made a mistake, I said, my voice rising. Or someone is lying. Because I was married to Thomas for 32 years, and I know what he looks like, and this is not him. The room fell silent. Dr. Patel looked uncomfortable. Sarah was staring at the body with an expression I couldn't read. Was it shock? Confusion? Something else? Perhaps we should step outside, Dr. Patel suggested. There may have been an error. We can check the records. Contact the police officers who found the vehicle. Yes, I said. Please do that. Because whoever this man is, he's not my husband. And I want to know where Thomas really is. We left the cold room and went to a small office down the hall. Dr. Patel made some phone calls, while Sarah and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs, waiting. Sarah hadn't said a word since we left the body. She was staring at the floor, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sarah, I said quietly, are you all right? She didn't answer right away. When she finally looked at me, there was something in her eyes that I didn't understand, something that looked almost like fear. Mom, I don't understand. I saw the pictures. The police showed me pictures from the scene. They said it was Dad. His car, his license, his wedding ring. His wedding ring? I felt a chill run down my spine. They found his wedding ring on the body? Yes. The gold band with the inscription. You know the one? I did know the one. I had picked it out myself 32 years ago. Had it engraved on the inside with our wedding date and the words, "Forever yours, Helen." If this man was wearing Thomas's wedding ring, then how was he not Thomas? Had Thomas given his ring to someone else? Had it been stolen? Had Thomas been involved in something I didn't know about? The questions multiplied in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. Dr. Patel returned after about 20 minutes. His expression was grim. "Mrs. Mitchell, I've spoken with the officers who handled the scene. According to their report, the vehicle found at Miller's Ravine was registered to Thomas Mitchell. The body was found inside the vehicle. The identification documents in the wallet belong to Thomas Mitchell, and the wedding ring on the deceased matches the description of your husband's ring." "But the body isn't Thomas," I repeated. "I'm telling you, that man is not my husband." "I understand your certainty, ma'am, but you've just experienced a tremendous shock. Sometimes, in cases of severe trauma or accident damage, loved ones have difficulty recognizing." "There's no damage to the face," I cut him off. "I saw him clearly. The features are wrong. The scar is wrong. The fingers are wrong. I know my husband. That man is a stranger." Dr. Patel sighed. "If you're absolutely certain, we can perform additional verification. Dental records, fingerprints if they're on file anywhere, possibly DNA testing. But these things take time." "Then take the time," I said, "because I'm not claiming that body until you prove to me it's Thomas, and I want to know what really happened out there on that road." We left the morgue without answers. Sarah drove me home in silence. I could tell she wanted to say something, wanted to talk about what had happened, but she seemed unable to find the words. Her hands were tight on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed straight ahead. When we pulled into my driveway, she finally spoke. "Mom, maybe you should stay with me tonight. You shouldn't be alone." "I'll be fine," I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. "I need some time to think, to process this. What if what if he comes home?" The question hung in the air between us. What if Thomas came home? What if there had been some terrible mistake, some mix-up, and he was actually alive somewhere? What if he walked through the door tonight like nothing had happened? "Then I need to be here," I said, "in case he does." Sarah nodded slowly. She looked exhausted, drained, like she had aged 10 years in the space of a few hours. "Call me if you need anything," she said. "Anything at all." "I will." I got out of the car and watched her drive away. Then I went inside my empty house and stood in the kitchen where I had been standing that morning, making coffee, looking out the window, thinking about groceries and hair appointments and ordinary things. That life felt like it belonged to someone else now, someone naive and trusting and completely unaware of the truth lurking beneath the surface. Where was Thomas? If that body wasn't him, then where was my husband? I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to think. Tried to make sense of something that made no sense at all. Thomas's car had been found at Miller's Ravine. A body was inside, wearing Thomas's wedding ring, carrying Thomas's identification. By all logical accounts, it should have been Thomas. The police believed it was Thomas. Even Sarah, who had looked at photos from the scene, believed it was Thomas. But it wasn't. I was certain of that, as certain as I had ever been about anything, which meant one of two things. Either Thomas had been in that car with another man, a man who was now dead while Thomas was, where? Injured somewhere? Wandering in confusion? Or Thomas had wanted people to think he was dead. The thought crept into my mind, uninvited, unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. What if Thomas had staged his own death? What if he had put another man's body in his car, dressed that man in his clothes, put his ring on that man's finger, and sent the car off the road? But why? Why would Thomas do something like that? What could possibly drive a man to fake his own death? And who was the dead man in the morgue? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room in the dark, waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the door to open, waiting for something to happen that would explain everything. Nothing happened. The phone stayed silent. The door stayed closed. And when dawn finally came, I was no closer to answers than I had been the night before. The next morning, the police called. Detective Marcus Hayes, the lead investigator on the case, wanted to speak with me. He had heard about my reaction at the morgue, my insistence that the body wasn't Thomas. He wanted to understand why I was so certain. I agreed to meet him at the station. I needed answers as much as he did. Detective Hayes was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a patient demeanor. He reminded me of a doctor, actually, the good kind, who listens carefully and doesn't rush to conclusions. He brought me coffee, made sure I was comfortable, and then asked me to tell him everything. So I did. I told him about Thomas's crooked finger, about the scar that shouldn't have been there, about every small detail that proved to me the body wasn't my husband. I told him about our marriage, about Thomas's work, about everything I could think of that might be relevant. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said finally, "I'm going to be honest with you. We've started looking into this more closely based on your statements. We're waiting on dental record confirmation and have requested fingerprint analysis. If you're right, if that body isn't your husband, then we're dealing with a much more complicated situation than a simple car accident." "What kind of situation?" He hesitated. "Let me ask you something first. Were you aware of any problems in your husband's life? Financial difficulties? Business disputes? Personal conflicts? Anything that might give someone a motive to harm him or to make him disappear?" "No," I said automatically. But even as the word left my mouth, I realized I wasn't sure. How much did I really know about Thomas's business? How much did I really know about his life outside our home? "What about your daughter?" Detective Hayes continued. "Sarah works with her father, correct? At the company?" "Yes. She's been working there for about 8 years now. Have you spoken with her about the details of the business? Any concerns she might have mentioned?" I thought back over recent conversations with Sarah. Had she said anything unusual? Anything worrying? There was one thing. A few weeks ago, Sarah had come over for dinner. Thomas wasn't there. He had some late meeting, he said. Sarah had seemed distracted, picking at her food, barely contributing to the conversation. When I asked if everything was okay, she had shrugged and said work was stressful. Nothing to worry about. But the look in her eyes had been the same look I had seen at the morgue. That flash of something hidden, something she wasn't telling me. "My daughter mentioned that work was stressful recently," I told Detective Hayes, but she didn't give me specifics. He nodded, writing something in his notebook. "We'll need to speak with her as well, and with anyone else connected to your husband's business." "Do you think Thomas is alive?" I asked, the question bursting out of me. "Do you think he staged this somehow?" Detective Hayes met my eyes. "I think something is very wrong here, Mrs. Mitchell, and I intend to find out what it is." I left the police station feeling more confused than ever. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mom, where are you?" "I came by the house, and you weren't there?" "I was at the police station," I said. "They wanted to ask me some questions." There was a pause, longer than normal. "What kind of questions?" "About your father, about the body, about why I'm so sure it isn't him." Another pause. "Mom, I think we should talk. In person. Can I come over?" "I'm on my way home now. Meet me there." 20 minutes later, We were sitting across from each other at my kitchen table, the same table where Thomas and I had eaten thousands of meals over the years, the same table where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays and anniversaries. Now it felt like a stranger's table. Everything felt unfamiliar, off-kilter, wrong. Sarah looked even worse than she had the day before. She clearly hadn't slept either. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face drawn, her hands shaking slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of tea. She wasn't drinking. "Sarah," I said gently, "what's going on? I feel like there's something you're not telling me." She looked down at the table, took a deep breath, and then she said something that knocked the wind out of me. "Mom, I need to tell you something about Dad. Something I should have told you a long time ago." I felt my heart stop for a moment. The way Sarah said those words, the weight behind them, the fear in her eyes. This was something big, something terrible. I could feel it in my bones before she even spoke. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What should you have told me?" Sarah's hands were trembling now. She wrapped them tighter around the teacup, as if trying to draw warmth from it. But the tea had gone cold. Neither of us had touched our drinks. "It started about 2 years ago," she began, her voice unsteady. "I noticed some things at work. Discrepancies in the books. Payments going to companies I had never heard of. Money moving in ways that didn't make sense. I listened, not understanding where this was going, but feeling dread building in my chest with every word. At first, I thought it was just bookkeeping errors. You know how complicated real estate transactions can be. Lots of moving parts, lots of accounts. It's easy to get confused. So I didn't say anything. I just tried to figure it out on my own." She paused, took a shaky breath, and continued. "But the more I looked, the more I found. Hidden accounts, shell companies, properties that existed on paper but not in reality. Mom, Dad wasn't just running a real estate business. He was running something else, something illegal." The word hit me like a physical blow. Illegal. My Thomas. The man who went to church every Sunday. The man who coached Little League Baseball for 10 years. The man who donated to every charity that came knocking at our door. Illegal. What kind of illegal? I heard myself ask. Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Money laundering, Mom. Dad was laundering money for people. Bad people. I don't know all the details. I don't know who they are or where the money comes from. But I know it's happening. I've seen the evidence." I sat in stunned silence. The kitchen suddenly felt cold, despite the sun streaming through the windows. Everything I thought I knew about my husband, about my marriage, about my life, was crumbling around me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked. "Why didn't you go to the police?" Sarah's face crumbled. "Because I was scared, Mom. Terrified. When I confronted Dad about it, he changed. He became someone I didn't recognize. He said I didn't understand. He said it was complicated. He said if I told anyone, if I went to the authorities, people would get hurt. Our family would get hurt. He threatened you." Not directly, but the implication was clear. The people he was working with, they weren't the kind of people who let things go. They weren't the kind of people who forgave mistakes. If I talked, there would be consequences. I thought about all the times, over the past 2 years, that Sarah had seemed distant, stressed, not quite herself. I had attributed it to work pressure, to the challenges of being a young professional. I never imagined she was carrying something like this. "There's more," Sarah said, and I braced myself for another blow. "About 6 months ago, something changed. Dad started acting differently. Nervous, paranoid. He would have meetings at strange hours with people who never came to the office. He started keeping a second phone, one he thought I didn't know about. A second phone? Yes. He would take calls on it and then disappear for hours. When I asked where he was going, he would give vague answers. Business meetings, client dinners, the usual excuses. But I could tell something was wrong. I remembered the late nights, the unexplained absences, the times Thomas would come home smelling like cigarettes, even though he had quit smoking 15 years ago. I had noticed these things, but hadn't questioned them, hadn't wanted to question them, because questioning meant doubting, and doubting meant admitting that something was wrong. "Do you think the people he was working with killed him?" I asked, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Sarah shook her head slowly. "That's just it, Mom. I don't think Dad is dead." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "Think about it. The body that isn't him, the staged accident, the convenient timing. What if Dad isn't the victim here? What if he planned this whole thing? But why? Why would he fake his own death?" "To escape," Sarah said simply. "To get away from the people he was working with, or maybe to get away from something else. Something even worse." I stood up abruptly, unable to sit still any longer. I walked to the window and looked out at the backyard. The same backyard where Thomas had built Sarah a treehouse when she was 8. The same backyard where we had hosted countless barbecues and birthday parties. The same backyard where Thomas had proposed to me 33 years ago, on a summer evening when the fireflies were dancing in the air. How much of my life had been a lie? How much of the man I loved had been real? "There's something else I need to tell you," Sarah said from behind me. Her voice was even more strained now, if that was possible. Something about Derek. I turned around. Derek, Sarah's husband, the man I had welcomed into our family like a son. "What about Derek?" Sarah's face twisted with pain. "He's involved too. In whatever Dad was doing. He's been part of it from the beginning. Maybe even before I started working at the company." I felt sick. Literally sick. Like I might throw up right there on the kitchen floor. "Derek introduced me to Dad's business," Sarah continued. "He encouraged me to work there. He was always so supportive, so enthusiastic. I thought it was because he loved me, because he wanted us to build something together as a family. But now, I realize he was just keeping an eye on me, making sure I didn't see too much, making sure I stayed quiet. Does Derek know about the body? About your father faking his death? I don't know. Maybe, probably. They were close, Mom. Closer than I ever realized. They had meetings I wasn't invited to, phone calls they didn't want me to hear. I thought it was just business, just men doing business things. But now," she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I walked back to the table and sat down heavily. My legs felt weak, my whole body drained. In the span of 2 days, I had lost my husband, discovered he might still be alive, learned that he was a criminal, and found out that my son-in-law was involved in something dark and dangerous. "What do we do now?" I asked. It was the only question I could think of. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, "but I think we need to find Dad. We need to find out what really happened, and we need to figure out who that man in the morgue actually is." Finding Thomas became my obsession over the following days. While the police conducted their official investigation, I conducted my own. I started by searching the house, going through Thomas's belongings with fresh eyes, looking for anything that might give me a clue to where he had gone or what he had been planning. I found the second phone in the bottom drawer of his desk in our home office. It was hidden inside an old book, hollowed out to create a secret compartment. The phone was dead, the battery completely drained, but I charged it and managed to unlock it using Thomas's birthday as the passcode. Some things never change, I thought bitterly. The phone contained a treasure trove of information: text messages, call logs, photos, evidence of a double life I never knew existed. There were messages to someone saved only as M. Cryptic messages about meetings and payments and deliveries. There were photos of documents I didn't understand. Financial statements and contracts with names I didn't recognize. And there were voicemails, dozens of them from various numbers, all delivering messages in code. But the most shocking discovery came when I scrolled through the photo gallery. There were pictures of Thomas. Not the Thomas I knew. The husband and father in khakis and polo shirts. A different Thomas. This Thomas wore expensive suits. This Thomas stood next to luxury cars. This Thomas had his arm around women I had never seen, in places I didn't recognize. And in several of these photos, there was another man, a man with gray hair and a scar above his left eyebrow, a man with straight fingers and an unfamiliar face, the man from the morgue. I stared at the photos, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Thomas and this stranger, together, smiling at the camera like old friends. In one photo, they were at a restaurant, raising glasses of wine in a toast. In another, they were standing in front of a building I didn't recognize, shaking hands like they had just completed a deal. Who was this man? And why had he ended up dead in Thomas's car? I called Detective Hayes and told him what I had found. He came over immediately, took the phone and spent hours going through its contents with his team. When he finally emerged from my living room, his face was grim. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, "the man in those photos matches the body at the morgue. We've been able to identify him through facial recognition. His name was Gerald Patterson. He had a criminal record. Fraud mostly, white-collar stuff. He was known to the FBI as a person of interest in several money laundering operations. Gerald Patterson." Finally, a name for the stranger who had been wearing my husband's ring. "Do you think Thomas killed him?" I asked, forcing myself to say the words out loud. Detective Hayes hesitated. "It's too early to draw conclusions, but we're treating this as a homicide investigation now, and your husband is our primary suspect." The words hit me like a hammer. My husband. A killer. It seemed impossible, unthinkable. And yet, what did I really know about Thomas? What did I really know about anyone? "We've also been able to trace some of the financial records on the phone," Detective Hayes continued. "Your husband was involved in a significant money laundering operation. We're talking millions of dollars, Mrs. Mitchell." "Millions?" Millions. The word echoed in my head. Where had this money come from? Where had it gone? And how had Thomas hidden something this massive from me for so long? "There's something else," the detective said. "We found evidence that your husband was planning to leave the country. He had purchased a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. The flight was scheduled for 2 days after the accident. So he was running." "It appears so. And it looks like Gerald Patterson might have been running with him, or maybe against him. We don't know yet what their relationship was. Partners? Rivals? It's still unclear." After Detective Hayes left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the debris of my shattered life. The investigation was ongoing, but I had heard enough to know that nothing would ever be the same. Thomas was alive somewhere, probably far away, probably under a new name, living a life I knew nothing about. He had left behind a dead man, a grieving wife, and a trail of crimes that would take years to unravel. And he had left Sarah, our daughter, the child he claimed to love more than anything. That night, Sarah came over with a box of files she had taken from the office, documents she had been secretly collecting over the past 2 years, evidence of her father's crimes that she had been too afraid to share with anyone. "I made copies of everything I found suspicious," she said, spreading the papers across the dining room table. "I didn't know what to do with them, so I just kept them hidden. I thought maybe someday I would find the courage to do something." We spent hours going through the documents together. Financial statements, shell company registrations, property deeds for buildings that didn't exist. It was overwhelming, a maze of paperwork designed to confuse and misdirect. But one document stood out, a letter, handwritten, from Thomas to someone named Marcus. In it, Thomas outlined his plan to disappear. He talked about the problems he was facing, the people who were after him, the need to start fresh somewhere new. And he talked about Gerald Patterson. "Gerald knows too much," Thomas had written. "He's become a liability. I need to deal with him before I leave. Deal with him." The words were cold, clinical, terrifying. My husband had written about killing another human being, like he was discussing a business transaction. "Dad was going to kill him," Sarah whispered, reading over my shoulder. "He planned it." "And he went through with it," I said, my voice hollow. "He put Gerald's body in his car and sent it off the road. Made it look like an accident. Made everyone think Thomas was dead. So he could disappear. Start over somewhere else. Without us," I added. "Without his family." Sarah was crying now, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I reached out and took her hand, and we sat there together, 2 women abandoned by a man they thought they knew. The investigation continued for weeks. The police worked with the FBI, unraveling the complex web of Thomas's criminal enterprises. They discovered connections to organized crime, to international money laundering networks, to people in places that seemed impossibly far from our quiet life in Ohio. Gerald Patterson's death was ruled a homicide. Thomas was officially charged, in absentia, with murder, money laundering, and a dozen other crimes. An international warrant was issued for his arrest. His photo appeared on news broadcasts, on wanted posters, on the internet. My husband's face, the face I had loved for 32 years, became the face of a fugitive. Through it all, I had to deal with the practical aspects of my new reality. The bank accounts were frozen as part of the investigation. The house was searched multiple times. Reporters camped out on my lawn, hungry for any scrap of information about the missing killer and his unsuspecting wife. I moved in with Sarah for a while. Her house was smaller, more private, easier to defend against the media circus. But even there, I wasn't safe from the truth. Derek disappeared 3 days after the investigation went public. He packed a bag while Sarah was at work and vanished without a word. The police suspected he had fled to join Thomas, wherever Thomas was hiding. They added Derek's name to the list of wanted fugitives. Sarah was devastated. Her husband, the man she had trusted, had abandoned her, just like her father had abandoned me. We held each other and cried, 2 generations of women betrayed by the men in their lives. "How did we not see it?" Sarah asked one night when we were sitting together on her couch, too exhausted to sleep. "How did we live with them for so long and not know who they really were?" "Because we didn't want to know," I said. "Because it's easier to believe in the people we love than to question them. Because trust is a beautiful thing until it's used against you." 6 months passed. The media attention faded The investigation stalled. Thomas and Derek remained at large, ghosts who had slipped through the cracks and disappeared into the world. I eventually moved back into my house, which was released by the authorities after they finished their searches. It felt empty now, haunted by memories of a life that had been built on lies. But it was still my home, and I wasn't going to let Thomas take that from me too. Sarah and I grew closer during those months. Our shared trauma bonded us in ways that nothing else could have. We talked for hours, processed. Our grief and anger together helped each other rebuild. And then, one evening, I got a phone call. I didn't recognize the number. It was from overseas, somewhere in Europe based on the country code. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another journalist or scammer, but something made me pick up. Helen. The voice on the other end was one I would have recognized anywhere. One I had heard every day for 32 years. One that still appeared in my dreams, no matter how much I wanted to forget. Thomas. My blood ran cold. For a long moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stand there frozen. The phone pressed against my ear. Helen, are you there? Please don't hang up. I need to talk to you. You have nothing to say that I want to hear, I finally managed. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please, just listen. There are things you don't understand, things I need to explain. Explain? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You want to explain why you faked your death? Why you killed a man? Why you abandoned your family and destroyed our lives? It wasn't like that. It's more complicated than you know. Then tell me, I said, surprising myself. Tell me what's so complicated that it justifies everything you did. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Thomas breathing, could almost see him gathering his thoughts, preparing his story. I got involved with bad people, he said finally, years ago. It started small. A favor here, a transaction there. Before I knew it, I was in too deep to get out. They owned me, Helen. They had leverage over me, over us, over Sarah. So you ran. I had no choice. They were going to kill me, kill all of us. The only way to protect you was to disappear, to make them think I was dead. And Gerald Patterson? Was killing him part of protecting us? Another pause. Longer this time. Gerald was going to talk, Thomas said. He was going to tell them where I was, in exchange for his own safety. If he talked, they would have found me. Found you? Found Sarah? I couldn't let that happen. So you murdered him? I did what I had to do. The coldness in his voice made me shiver. This was not the man I had married. This was a stranger wearing my husband's voice, speaking words that made no sense in the context of our life together. Where are you? I asked. I can't tell you that. Why are you calling? Because I miss you. Because I still love you. Because I want you to understand. I laughed again, the same bitter sound. Love? You don't know what love is, Thomas. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't abandon. Love doesn't kill. Helen, please. No, you don't get to ask me for understanding. You don't get to call and explain yourself. Like this is some kind of misunderstanding. You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, our daughter's life. And for what? For money? For survival? For your own selfish desire to escape the consequences of your choices? You don't understand the position I was in, and I don't want to understand. I spent 32 years trying to understand you, Thomas. 32 years of believing in you, trusting you, building a life with you, and it was all a lie. Every single moment. There was silence on the line. When Thomas spoke again, his voice was quieter. "I'm sorry, Helen. I truly am. Sorry isn't enough. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Sorry doesn't bring back the years I wasted on you. What can I do? Tell me what I can do to make this right." I thought about the question. Thought about everything that had happened. Everything I had lost. Everything I had learned about the man I had married. "You can turn yourself in," I said finally. "You can face justice for what you did. You can stop running and take responsibility." The silence stretched for a long time. I could hear Thomas breathing, could sense his hesitation. "I can't do that," he said finally. "They'll kill me in prison. The people I worked for, they have connections everywhere. If I turn myself in, I'm a dead man. Then I have nothing else to say to you." "Helen, wait." I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I sat down on the couch and wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold together the pieces of my broken heart. The next morning, I told Detective Hayes about the call. He traced the number to a burner phone purchased in Portugal. By the time local authorities arrived at the location, Thomas was long gone. He was always one step ahead, always disappearing before anyone could catch him. Months turned into a year. The trail went cold. Thomas became a ghost, a memory, a shadow that hung over my life, but never quite materialized. And then, on the 1-year anniversary of that terrible day at the morgue, I received a package in the mail. The package was small, no bigger than a shoebox. It had no return address, just my name and address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. The postmark said it had been mailed from Greece, which meant nothing to me. I didn't know anyone in Greece. I almost threw it away. After everything that had happened, I was suspicious of anything unexpected arriving at my door. But something made me open it. Curiosity, maybe. Or that stubborn need to know the truth that had driven me through this entire nightmare. Inside the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was a USB drive, and underneath that, a handwritten note. "Helen, I know you hate me. I know you'll never forgive me. But you deserve to know everything, the whole truth. Not the version the police have, not the version the media created. The real story. Watch what's on this drive. Then decide what to do with it. I'm sorry. For everything. Thomas." I stared at the note for a long time. Part of me wanted to destroy it, to smash the USB drive and pretend I had never received this package. I had spent a year trying to move on, trying to rebuild my life, trying to forget about the man who had betrayed me so completely. But I couldn't. The need to know was too strong. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and opened the single video file it contained. Thomas appeared on the screen. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. His hair had gone completely gray, and there were deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was sitting in a nondescript room. White walls, simple furniture, nothing that would give away his location. "Helen," he began, his voice tired and sad. "If you're watching this, it means I found a way to get it to you. I've been trying for months. It's not easy to send things when you're running, when you're hiding, when every day might be your last." He paused, rubbed his eyes, and continued. "I need to tell you the truth, the whole truth. Not because I expect forgiveness, not because I think it will change anything, but because you spent 32 years with a man you didn't really know, and that's not fair. You deserve to understand who I really was, who I really am." I watched, unable to look away, as Thomas told his story. It started 35 years ago, before we even met. Thomas was young, ambitious, desperate to escape poverty. He grew up with nothing, he said. His father was a drunk who couldn't hold a job. His mother worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Thomas swore he would never live like that. He would do whatever it took to be successful. Whatever it took turned out to be working for people who operated outside the law. It started small. Deliveries, messages, things that seemed harmless, but were actually the first steps into a world he could never escape. By the time Thomas realized what he had gotten himself into, it was too late. He knew too much. He had done too much. The people he worked for made it clear that there was no leaving, not alive. So I built 2 lives, Thomas said on the video. The life you knew, Helen, the husband, the father, the businessman, and the other life, the one I hid from everyone, the one that kept us safe. Safe. The word made me sick. We had never been safe. We had been hostages, living in a bubble of ignorance while Thomas played his dangerous games. He explained how the money laundering worked, how he had used his real estate business as a front, how the properties he bought and sold were actually vehicles for cleaning dirty money, making it look legitimate. The millions that passed through his hands belonged to criminals, drug dealers, human traffickers, and Thomas took his cut, year after year, building our comfortable life on the backs of other people's suffering. I told myself it was necessary, he said. I told myself I was protecting you and Sarah by keeping you in the dark, but that was a lie. I was protecting myself. I was too afraid to walk away, too afraid to face the consequences. So I kept going, kept pretending, kept lying. Then he talked about Gerald Patterson. Gerald was a partner of sorts, another man caught in the same web, doing similar work for similar people. They had known each other for years, had worked together on countless transactions, but Gerald got greedy. He started skimming money, taking more than his share, thinking no one would notice. Someone noticed. The people they worked for decided Gerald needed to be dealt with, and they decided Thomas would be the one to do it. They gave me a choice, Thomas said, his voice breaking. Kill Gerald, or they would kill all of us. You, Sarah, everyone I loved. They showed me pictures of our house, pictures of Sarah at work, pictures of you at the grocery store. They knew everything about our lives, and they made it clear that there was no negotiating. I felt tears streaming down my face, but I couldn't stop watching. Thomas described how he had planned Gerald's death, how he had lured him to Miller's Ravine under the pretense of a meeting, how he had killed him in the car and staged the accident to look like Thomas had died instead. It was supposed to be his way out, his escape. With everyone thinking Thomas was dead, the people he worked for would have no reason to come after his family. I thought I was saving you, Thomas said. I thought if I disappeared, if they believed I was gone, you would be safe. I was wrong. I was so wrong. He explained how his plan had fallen apart almost immediately. My insistence that the body wasn't Thomas had raised questions. The investigation had uncovered things he never expected. And now, instead of being safe, Sarah and I were under even more scrutiny, even more danger. The people I worked for know I'm alive now, Thomas said. They know I tried to trick them, and they're angry, very angry. I've been running for a year, staying one step ahead, trying to figure out how to fix this. But there is no fixing it. There's no way out. The video continued for another 20 minutes. Thomas talked about Derek, how he had recruited his son-in-law into the organization, how Derek had been his protege in the criminal world. He apologized for bringing Derek into Sarah's life. for using their marriage as cover, for putting our daughter in danger. He talked about his regrets, the birthdays he had missed, the moments he had been too preoccupied with his other life to truly be present, the thousand small betrayals that had added up to a lifetime of lies. And at the end, he said something that stopped my heart. "I'm dying, Helen. The stress, the running, the constant fear. My heart can't take it anymore. The doctors I've seen, in secret, under false names, they all say the same thing. I have months left, maybe weeks, and I don't want to die without you knowing the truth." He paused, tears in his eyes. "I loved you. I know you don't believe that. I know my actions told a different story. But in my own broken, twisted way, I loved you more than anything. You were the only real thing in my life, the only good thing, and I destroyed it. I destroyed everything." The video ended. The screen went black, and I sat there, alone in my living room, crying for a man I hated and loved in equal measure. 3 weeks after receiving the package, I got another phone call, this time from Detective Hayes. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, his voice somber, "we've received confirmation from authorities in Portugal. Thomas Mitchell was found dead in a small village outside Lisbon. Heart attack, according to the local medical examiner." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "There's paperwork to deal with," Detective Hayes continued. "Legal matters regarding the charges, the investigation, the estate. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. It's over, Mrs. Mitchell. It's finally over." Over. And the word felt strange. Was anything ever really over? Thomas was dead. For real this time. And the man who had loved me and lied to me, who had protected me and betrayed me, who had built our life on a foundation of crime and deception, he was gone. I should have felt relief, closure, peace. But all I felt was emptiness. A void where my husband used to be, now filled with questions that would never be answered. The months that followed were about rebuilding. Slowly, painfully, one day at a time. The legal matters were complicated. Thomas's assets, what remained of them after the investigation, were tangled in lawsuits and claims. Insurance companies refused to pay. Business partners sued for damages. Creditors came out of the woodwork, demanding money that Thomas had owed. In the end, I lost almost everything. The house had to be sold to cover debts. The savings were gone. The comfortable life Thomas had provided was revealed for what it truly was. Stolen money, dirty money, blood money. But I survived. That's what matters. I survived. Sarah survived too. She divorced Derek in absentia, freed herself from the last connection to her father's criminal world. She got a new job, a fresh start, a chance to build a life that was truly her own. We leaned on each other during the hard times. Mother and daughter, united by trauma, working together to create something good out of the wreckage. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, just a bedroom, a living room, a tiny kitchen. But it was mine, really mine, not bought with dirty money, not tainted by lies. I got a job at a local bookstore. Part-time, nothing demanding. Just something to fill the hours, to give me purpose, to remind me that life goes on even after everything falls apart. And slowly, I started to heal. The anger faded first. Not completely, but enough that I could think about Thomas without feeling like I was choking. The sadness lingered longer, a dull ache that lived in my chest and flared up at unexpected moments. A song on the radio that Thomas used to like. A smell that reminded me of our kitchen. A dream where everything was still normal, where I woke up next to my husband and none of this had ever happened. But even the sadness became manageable eventually. It became part of me, woven into the fabric of who I was, neither controlling me nor defining me. I learned to live with uncertainty. There were still things I didn't know about Thomas, about his life, about the people he had worked with, questions that would never be answered, mysteries that would never be solved. I learned to accept that, to make peace with the gaps in my knowledge, to focus on what I could control rather than what I couldn't. 2 years after Thomas's death, I finally felt ready to share my story. I wrote it all down, everything that had happened, everything I had discovered, everything I had felt. I didn't know if anyone would want to read it. I didn't know if it would help anyone else. But I knew that getting it out of my head and onto paper was important, necessary, healing. A local newspaper picked up the story, then a national magazine, then a television producer called, wanting to make a documentary. My quiet, private tragedy had become something public, something shared, something that resonated with people I had never met. I discovered that I wasn't alone. There were other women out there, other families, who had been deceived by the people they loved, who had built lives on lies without knowing it, who had woken up one day to discover that everything they believed was false. We found each other. We formed support groups. We shared our stories. We helped each other understand that being deceived wasn't our fault, that trusting the people we loved wasn't a weakness, that survival wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Sarah got married again, 3 years after Derek's disappearance. Her new husband was a good man, honest and kind, the opposite of everything Derek had been. I walked her down the aisle, taking the place of the father who had abandoned her. It was one of the proudest moments of my life. She had a baby the following year, a little girl named Hope. When I held my granddaughter for the first time, I understood why I had survived, why I had kept going even when everything seemed hopeless. This moment, this tiny perfect person, this new life that represented everything good and pure in the world. Hope was worth everything I had been through, every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of despair. Worth it, for the privilege of being her grandmother. I'm 63 now. 5 years have passed since that terrible day at the morgue. 5 years of rebuilding, recovering, rediscovering who I am beyond the role of Thomas Mitchell's wife. I've learned things about myself that I never knew before. I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient, more capable of handling whatever life throws at me. I've also learned things about life that I wish I had understood earlier. That people are complicated. That love doesn't protect you from deception. That trust is precious and fragile and worth giving, even when it's been broken before. Thomas was not a good man. That's a truth I've had to accept. He did terrible things. He hurt people. He lied to everyone he claimed to love. But he was also the man who held me when I cried. The man who stayed up all night when Sarah was sick. The man who built a treehouse in our backyard and coached Little League baseball and danced with me in our kitchen on Sunday mornings. He was all of those things. The good and the bad. The love and the betrayal. The truth and the lies. All mixed together. Impossible to separate. That's what I've learned about people. We're not one thing or another. We're everything, all at once. Contradictory and complicated and impossible to fully understand. I don't forgive Thomas. I don't think I ever will. But I've made peace with who he was, with what happened, with the life we shared and the life he destroyed. And I've moved on, not forgetting, not pretending, just moving on. One day at a time, one breath at a time, one small step after another into a future that I never expected, but that I'm grateful to have. That's my story. From that morning at the morgue to today. From the moment I realized the body wasn't my husband to the moment I finally understood who he really was. It's not a happy story. It's not a story with a neat ending or a satisfying resolution, but it's true. And sometimes the truth is the only thing we have. I share it with you, not because I want sympathy, not because I want attention, but because maybe, somewhere out there, there's someone going through something similar. Someone who feels alone, someone who feels lost, someone who needs to know that they can survive this, that they can come out the other side. You can. I promise you can. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. There will be days when you want to give up, days when the pain feels unbearable, days when you can't imagine ever feeling normal again. But those days pass. The pain fades, and slowly, gradually, life returns. You just have to keep going, keep breathing, keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's what I did, and that's what got me here, in my small apartment, with my daughter and my granddaughter nearby, with a life that's simple and quiet and honest, a life that's finally, truly mine. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about this whole story? How would you have reacted if you found out your husband had been living a double life for 30 years? Would you have watched that video Thomas sent? Or would you have destroyed it without looking? And what about Sarah? Do you think she should have told her mother earlier about what she discovered at work? I really want to know your thoughts, so drop them in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I love hearing different perspectives on these complicated situations. We all see things differently, and that's what makes these conversations so valuable. If this story meant something to you, if it touched you in any way, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel and lets me know that you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I have so many more stories to share with you. Stories about family, secrets, betrayal, and the strength it takes to survive when everything falls apart. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being here.